The wards over the North Viaduct didn't shatter, they dissolved like sugar in boiling water. Elian Vance felt the breach in his teeth before he saw the green sparks. He was alone on the wet stone battlements, shivering under an invisibility cloak that had seen better days, staring down into the darkness of the grounds. There were 32 of them. He counted the magical signatures pressing against the castle's skin, a suffocating weight of malice moving in silence through the torrential rain. 32 Death Eaters against one 17-year-old Hufflepuff with a cracked wand core and a heavy limp. The order was hours away. The teachers were asleep in the secure wing, behind layers of protection that wouldn't hold against a force this size for more than 10 minutes. If Elian didn't stop them here, at the perimeter, the massacre would be absolute. He had no potions left. His defensive shielding charms were average at best. He had nowhere to run.
His hand trembled as he gripped his wand, his thumb brushing over the rough wood where he had taped it together. In his pocket, his fingers curled around a handful of enchanted copper coins, the components of the Ghost Choir, a spell so ridiculous that the Ravenclaws had laughed him out of the library when he first proposed the theory. They called it a parlour trick, a waste of magic, a spell for ventriloquists and failed bards. But as the first black hood emerged from the mist, stepping onto the bridge with the arrogance of a predator who knows the prey is cornered, Elian knew that this stupid, mocked piece of magic was the only thing standing between Hogwarts and a bloodbath. If you want to know how this forgotten student turned a useless sound charm into the castle's deadliest weapon, stay with me until the end of this story. It was the summer of 1997, the weeks of terror before the Ministry fell completely.
Elian had stayed behind because going home meant putting his Muggle parents in the crosshairs. He was a nobody in the school hierarchy, a student known for scraping by in Transfiguration and failing Duel Club consistently. He wasn't a fighter. He was a mimic, a boy who spent his free time trying to replicate the sounds of magical creatures rather than learning how to stun them. That night, the castle was a hollow shell, housing only a skeleton crew and a few students under hiding orders. The Death Eaters knew it. This wasn't a battle, it was supposed to be a liquidation. Elian watched the lead Death Eater raise a hand. The group fanned out, moving with military precision. They were 300 yards out, 200. The rain lashed against Elian's face, mixing with the cold sweat running down his neck. He needed them closer. He needed them committed to the bridge, where the acoustics were perfect. If he cast too early, they would scatter and pick him off from a distance.
If he waited too long, they would be inside the courtyard, and it would be over. The tactical pressure was crushing his chest. He calculated the distance, 150 yards. He could see their masks now, gleaming wetly in the moonlight. He remembered the mockery in the common room 3 months ago. He had been trying to layer sound, to make a single footstep sound like an army. It had resulted in a feedback loop that shattered 3 windows and earned him a month of detention. "It's useless, Vance," a prefect had sneered. "Unless you plan to annoy you-know-who to death, learn a real shield charm." Elian had stopped practicing in public after that, but he hadn't stopped practicing. He went to the owlery at night, refining the frequencies, learning how to bounce sound off stone, how to weave delay and echo into a solid wall of auditory hallucination. He wasn't trying to annoy anyone. He was trying to create presence where there was absence. Back on the bridge, the first curse flew. A jet of red light hissed past Elian's ear, singing the stone. They had spotted him.
He had hesitated a fraction of a second too long, paralyzed by the sheer number of enemies. A second curse slammed into the parapet, showering him with stone shrapnel. A sharp slice of granite cut his cheek, and the warm blood shocked him into motion. That was his mistake, waiting for the perfect moment while the enemy closed the gap. He scrambled back, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He was compromised. They knew he was alone. He could hear their laughter rising over the storm, a cruel, grating sound. They broke into a run, 32 killers rushing the single terrified boy on the bridge. "Take him alive," one of them shouted, voice amplified magically. "He can open the gates." Elian pressed his back against the cold stone of the gatehouse. This was it. He didn't have a choice anymore.
He pulled the copper coins from his pocket and threw them onto the wet cobblestones. They clattered, scattering in a precise geometric pattern he had measured out days ago. He pointed his taped wand at his own throat, then at the coins, and screamed the incantation in his mind. If this forgotten legend of Hogwarts is already touching your heart and you'd like to help keep these stories alive, you can support the channel by clicking the thanks button below. Every little bit helps me continue bringing you more hidden tales of courage and magic. The air on the bridge didn't just change, it exploded. Elian didn't cast a stunner or a shield. He cast the ghost choir, pouring every ounce of his magical core into the amplification. Suddenly, the sound of 32 rushing Death Eaters was drowned out. From the empty courtyard behind Elian came the roar of 100 voices, not distinct words, but the heavy rhythmic chanting of battle-hardened auras. The sound was physical.
A wall of pressure that hit the attackers with the force of a gale. Then came the footsteps. Not the light tread of a student, but the thunderous, synchronized march of an iron-shod legion. The Death Eaters skidded to a halt, confused. Their heads snapped up. To their ears, and thanks to the atmospheric charm Elian had woven into the mist, it sounded like the entire Ministry of Magic had just apparated behind the castle gates. "Ambush!" one of the Death Eaters screamed, firing a curse blindly into the fog. Elian didn't let up. He twisted his wand, sweating profusely, manipulating the soundscape like a conductor from hell. He threw a sound illusion to the left flank, the distinct crackling sound of heavy anti-siege wards powering up. The Death Eaters on the left panicked, scrambling away from the invisible threat, bunching together in the center of the bridge. That was exactly where Elian needed them. "Fire at will!" Elian roared.
His voice magnified to sound like a grizzled commander. He mimicked the incantations of high-level bombardment spells. Confringo, Reducto, Bombarda Maxima. He didn't actually cast them. He couldn't. He didn't have the power. But the sound was perfect. The screech of incoming spells, the whistle of doom dropping from the sky. The psychological effect was immediate and devastating. The 32 attackers, convinced they were about to be obliterated by a superior force, cast their strongest shield charms upward, bracing for an impact that never came. While they were distracted, Elian triggered the second part of his trap. He levitated the loose cobblestones on the bridge, stones he had loosened over weeks of lonely sentry duty, and banished them at knee height into the clustered group. It wasn't magic that took them down, it was physics and panic. The front row tripped, their shields faltering. The ones behind them,
blinded by the rain and the terrifying auditory illusions of dragons roaring and griffins diving, fired curses in pure reflex. Green and red light flashed chaotically within their own ranks. They were fighting shadows, and they were losing. "Retreat! It's a trap! The Order is here!" Elian watched from behind his pillar, his vision blurring. Maintaining the illusion was draining his life force. He could feel his nose bleeding, the copper taste filling his mouth. He mimicked the sound of a closing pincer movement, footsteps running along the outer walls surrounding the bridge. The Death Eaters broke. They didn't retreat in order. They routed. They trampled each other to get off the bridge, firing wild curses that brought down parts of the viaduct on their own heads. One Death Eater, more disciplined than the rest, paused and looked up at the gatehouse. He saw the lone figure of Elian, swaying, wand arm trembling uncontrollably. Realization dawned on the mask. He raised his wand.
The killing curse on the tip of his tongue. Elian had nothing left. No voice, no misdirection. He just stared back. But the panic Elian had engineered was too chaotic. Another fleeing Death Eater slammed into the one aiming, knocking his aim wide. The green light shattered a gargoyle 3 feet to Elian's left. The disciplined one was swept away in the tide of terrified dark wizards, fleeing a phantom army. Within 3 minutes, the bridge was empty, save for the groaning forms of 5 Death Eaters who had knocked each other unconscious or been hit by friendly fire. The rest had vanished into the night, convinced they had narrowly escaped a battalion. Elian slid down the wall, the adrenaline crashing out of his system. The silence that returned to Hogwarts was heavy, broken only by the real rain and the soft whimpering of the defeated men on the bridge. He looked at his wand. The tape had melted. The wood was scorched. He tried to stand, but his legs gave out.
When Remus Lupin and the advance guard of the Order finally arrived 20 minutes later, alerted by the triggered perimeter alarms, they came with wands drawn, expecting a siege. Instead, they found a battlefield of confusion. They found 5 bound Death Eaters and a bridge scarred by spellfire that had mostly come from the attackers themselves. And they found Elian Vance, passed out in a puddle, clutching a handful of copper coins. "Who did this?" Tonks asked, scanning the dark grounds for the squad of auras that must have intervened. "Where is the backup?" Lupin knelt beside the unconscious boy, checking his pulse. He looked at the melted wand, then at the terrified, confused state of the captives. He realized the truth slowly. There was no backup. There was no legion. Just one boy who was good at making noises. The official report mentioned a perimeter malfunction that repelled the assault.
The Ministry didn't want to admit that 32 of their most feared terrorists had been routed by a Hufflepuff with a party trick. Elian never received an Order of Merlin. He spent a week in the hospital wing recovering from magical exhaustion, and when he returned to the common room, he was still the quiet kid with the limp. But the older students stopped laughing at his sound experiments, and late at night, when the wind howled around the stone towers, the Death Eaters who had been there would sometimes wake up in a cold sweat, haunted by the sound of an army that never existed. If this forgotten legend of Hogwarts touched your heart, tell me in the comments, what would you have done in Elian's place? Like the video, share it with another Harry Potter fan, and subscribe to hear more hidden stories of courage, magic, and impossible odds. Sometimes, the loudest victory is the one that makes no sound at all.